Good evening and welcome back. Enjoy listening. Imagine yourself drifting into the soft glow of memory, where time stretches back more than 2,000 years. In the heart of the Italian peninsula, between rolling hills and the gentle curves of the Tiber River, a settlement begins to stir. Rome, still nameless, still fragile, emerges from myth. The tale begins with twins, Romulus and Remus, children abandoned by fate, yet spared by fortune. Legends say a she-wolf nursed them in a hidden cave, her warmth keeping them alive until shepherds took them in. These brothers, bold and restless, grew to dream of building something greater than themselves. But destiny is never without conflict. Their quarrel over who should rule led Romulus to strike down Remus. Out of brotherhood broken, a city was born. Rome took the name of Romulus, and so the story of the eternal city began. In those earliest days, the city was little more than huts on the Palatine Hill. But its people were fierce, practical, and driven. They welcomed outsiders, offering refuge to exiles and wanderers. Rome became a gathering of many, a blend of cultures and traditions that would shape its destiny. Soon, kings would rise, sacred rituals would take form, and the foundations of Roman order would settle like stones along the riverbank. As Rome's huts grew into villages, its people turned toward leaders who could guide them. Thus began the Age of Kings, a period wrapped in ritual, law, and legend. 7 kings would shape the character of early Rome, each leaving behind traditions that lasted for centuries. The first, Romulus, gave structure to the people. He created the Senate, an assembly of elders whose wisdom would advise rulers for generations. He also organized Rome's people into tribes and clans, giving them order and identity. But Romulus was also a warrior, and Rome's earliest expansion came through both diplomacy and force. After him came Numa Pompilius, remembered not for battles, but for peace. He was said to be wise and deeply spiritual, credited with bringing sacred rituals, priesthoods, and the calendar of festivals. In his reign, Rome grew closer to the gods, learning to see itself as a chosen people under divine guidance. Other kings followed. Tullus Hostilius, fierce in war, who destroyed the rival city of Alba Longa. Then Ancus Marcius, who built Rome's first bridge across the Tiber and extended its lands toward the sea. Tarquin the Elder, Servius Tullius, and Tarquin the Proud each added power and grandeur, with temples rising and city walls stretching higher. Yet, the Age of Kings would not last. Rome's final monarch, Tarquin the Proud, ruled with arrogance and cruelty. His tyranny and the dishonor brought upon noble families sparked rebellion. The people of Rome, weary of one man holding all power, cast off their king. In his place, they forged something new, something rare in the ancient world. Rome would no longer be a kingdom. It would become a republic. When Tarquin the Proud was driven from the city, a great change swept through Rome. No longer would a single king rule with unchecked power. Instead, the Romans created a system that balanced authority between many hands. This was the birth of the Republic, around 509 BCE. At the heart of this new order stood 2 consuls, elected officials who shared power. Each could command armies, pass laws, and preside over the Senate, but neither could act without the other. This careful balance was meant to prevent tyranny from returning. The Senate itself, once only advisors to kings, now became the steady voice of the Republic. Composed of Rome's wealthiest and most influential men, it guided policy, debated law, and represented the long memory of the city. Yet, it was not democracy as we know it today. Power still lay in the hands of the patricians, the aristocratic families. Still, Rome's common people, the plebeians, would not remain silent. They labored, they fought in the legions, and they demanded a voice. Through protest and persistence, they won the right to elect tribunes, officials who could protect them from injustice by shouting a single word, veto, meaning I forbid. The Republic was not perfect, but it was resilient. Its citizens believed in duty, discipline, and honor. They called this mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. It was tradition, custom, and the spirit of Rome itself. And under this system, the city began to grow, not just in size, but in ambition. Soon, Rome would look beyond its hills and riverbanks, seeking to defend itself, conquer rivals, and expand its influence across Italy. With the Republic established, Rome turned outward. Surrounded by rival tribes and cities, survival meant more than defense. It demanded conquest. Step by step, Rome began to expand across the Italian peninsula. At first, its enemies were close: the Latin tribes, the Sabines, the Etruscans. Each war tested Rome's discipline, but each victory brought new allies. And here was Rome's genius, not only in winning battles, but in binding others to its cause. Instead of destroying conquered peoples, Rome often offered them a place within its system. Some became citizens, others allies. All, however, were tied to Rome's destiny. Through this approach, Rome built a network of roads and colonies that stretched like veins across Italy. Soldiers could march quickly, messages could travel fast, and trade flowed more freely than ever before. Rome became not just a city, but the beating heart of a growing confederation. But challenges remained. The fierce Samnite tribes of central Italy waged long and bitter wars against Rome. The Samnite Wars tested Roman endurance for decades. Time and again, Rome suffered setbacks, but always it recovered, stronger than before. By the early 3rd century BCE, Rome had subdued nearly all of Italy. Yet even then, new storms gathered. In the south lay the wealthy Greek colonies, cities rich with culture and trade. When conflict arose, the Greeks called for aid from a powerful foreign king, Pyrrhus of Epirus. With his elephants and seasoned troops, Pyrrhus defeated the Romans in costly battles. Yet each victory drained him, leading to the phrase, a Pyrrhic victory. A win so costly is nearly a defeat. Eventually, Pyrrhus withdrew, leaving Rome triumphant. By 265 BCE, Rome stood as the master of Italy. Its soldiers were hardened, its alliances strong, and its ambitions rising. The Republic had forged itself in fire, but far greater challenges awaited. Across the sea lay a rival equal in power and wealth: Carthage. With Italy under Roman control, the Republic's gaze turned to the wider Mediterranean. Across the sea stood Carthage, a wealthy maritime power founded by Phoenician traders. Carthage ruled the waves, its fleets dominating trade routes from North Africa to Spain and Sicily. And it was Sicily, a fertile island between Italy and Africa, that became the spark of conflict. In 264 BCE, a dispute over a Sicilian city drew both Rome and Carthage into war. What began as a small quarrel soon became a struggle for supremacy. Rome, powerful on land but inexperienced at sea, faced Carthage's mighty navy. To meet this challenge, the Romans did something extraordinary. They built a fleet from scratch. But Rome was not content with ships alone. To turn naval battles into something more familiar, like fighting on land, they invented the corvus, a boarding bridge with a spike that could hook onto enemy decks. Once attached, Roman soldiers would storm across, turning sea battles into infantry fights. The war raged for over 20 years. It was brutal, costly, and uncertain. At times, Rome lost fleets to storms and saw thousands of men perish in the waves. Yet Rome's persistence never wavered. Slowly, painfully, victory came. By 241 BCE, Carthage was forced to surrender, ceding Sicily to Rome, the Republic's first province beyond Italy. This triumph marked the beginning of Rome as a Mediterranean power. But peace was only temporary. The rivalry with Carthage was not extinguished. It was only waiting for a more dangerous chapter, one led by a general whose name would forever echo through history. Hannibal. The First Punic War had humbled Carthage, but not broken it. In the years that followed, Carthage rebuilt its strength in Spain, forging new armies and gathering wealth under the command of one family, the Barcas. From that family rose a man whose name would terrify Rome: Hannibal. From childhood, Hannibal was taught to hate Rome. Legend says his father made him swear an oath never to be a friend of the Republic. When he became commander in Spain, Hannibal acted swiftly, besieging the city of Saguntum, a Roman ally. Rome protested, but Hannibal ignored them. War was declared in 218 BCE, and so began the Second Punic War, one of the most famous struggles in history. Instead of sailing to Italy, Hannibal chose a daring route. He led his army, tens of thousands of men, cavalry, and even war elephants, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and over the icy Alps. The journey was brutal, costing many lives, but when Hannibal emerged into Italy, Rome was unprepared. For years, Hannibal crushed Roman legions in battle. At the Trebia River, he outmaneuvered them. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed them in a fog, slaughtering thousands. And then came Cannae in 216 BCE, his greatest triumph. There, Hannibal encircled an army twice his size, destroying nearly all of it. It was one of the worst defeats in Rome's history, and fear swept across Italy. Yet Rome did not surrender. The Senate refused peace. Instead, they adopted a strategy of patience, avoiding open battle and slowly cutting off Hannibal's supplies. The Roman general Fabius earned the name the Delayer, keeping Rome alive through caution rather than glory. Hannibal fought on in Italy for more than a decade, undefeated in battle, but unable to break Rome's resilience. Meanwhile, Roman armies carried the fight into Spain and eventually to North Africa. There, under the command of a new leader, Scipio Africanus, Rome would challenge Carthage directly, forcing Hannibal to return home. The stage was set for a final, decisive clash. By 202 BCE, the tide of war had shifted. Hannibal, once master of Italy, was recalled to defend his homeland. Across the plains of North Africa, two of history's greatest generals prepared to meet: Hannibal of Carthage and Scipio Africanus of Rome. The Battle of Zama was unlike Hannibal's earlier victories. His army, though experienced, was weakened by years of war. Scipio, young but brilliant, had studied Hannibal's tactics and was ready with answers. Hannibal unleashed his war elephants first, hoping to scatter the Roman lines. But Scipio had prepared. His soldiers opened channels in their ranks, guiding the elephants harmlessly through before striking them down. Then came the clash of infantry. Hannibal's veterans pushed hard, but Scipio's legions held firm. At the decisive moment, Roman cavalry, commanded by Massinissa, a Numidian ally, struck from the rear. Surrounded, the Carthaginian army collapsed. Hannibal, the terror of Rome, was finally defeated. The war ended with harsh terms. Carthage lost its fleet, its overseas territories, and its ability to wage war without Rome's permission. Though the city survived, it was broken, while Rome emerged as the unchallenged power of the Western Mediterranean. For the Romans, the victory was not just military, it was destiny fulfilled. They had faced their greatest enemy and endured. Yet the spirit of conquest, once ignited, could not be contained. Rome would not stop at Italy or Sicily or Spain. Its ambitions now stretched across seas and continents. But even as Rome grew stronger abroad, tensions brewed at home. Wealth from conquest poured into the Republic, but so did inequality. The next chapters of Roman history would not be written by foreign generals, but by Rome's own citizens, struggling over land, power, and the future of the Republic itself. After the defeat of Carthage, Rome's ambitions expanded further east. The legions marched into Greece, Asia Minor, and beyond, toppling the mighty successors of Alexander the Great. Victories over Macedonia and the Seleucid Empire brought not only new lands but immense treasure. Rome was no longer just a city or a republic of farmers. It was becoming a Mediterranean empire. But with great wealth came great problems. The old Roman virtues, discipline, simplicity, equality among citizens, were slowly eroded. Conquered lands were divided, and the wealthy elite seized vast estates, called latifundia, worked by slaves brought in from abroad. Ordinary Roman farmers, once the backbone of the legions, struggled to survive. Many were forced off their land, crowding into the city of Rome, poor and restless. At the same time, political corruption spread. Senators grew rich from war and bribes, while the voice of the common people weakened. The Republic's carefully balanced system strained under the weight of greed and ambition. Amid this unrest rose two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They sought to restore justice by giving land back to the poor and strengthening the rights of ordinary citizens. But their reforms met fierce resistance from the Senate. Tiberius was killed in a riot, and years later, Gaius met the same fate. Their deaths marked a turning point. The Republic had shown that it would spill the blood of its own to protect the privileges of the powerful. The struggle between rich and poor, Senate and people, would not fade. Instead, it would grow more violent, setting the stage for decades of upheaval. For now, though Rome's armies continued to march, its territories expanding. But the unity that once defined the Republic was breaking apart. The true enemies of Rome were no longer abroad. They were within the Republic strained under inequality and unrest. New leaders rose, men whose power came not from tradition, but from their armies. Among the first was Gaius Marius, a skilled general from humble origins. Marius transformed Rome's military. No longer would only landowning citizens serve in the legions. Now the poor could enlist, earning pay, loot, and the hope of land after service. This reform made the army stronger, but it also tied soldiers' loyalty not to the Republic, but to their general. A dangerous shift had begun. Marius proved his worth by defeating Rome's enemies abroad, including the fierce Germanic tribes threatening Italy. He became a hero to the people, elected consul an unprecedented 7 times. Yet his dominance bred rivals. One such rival was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, another ambitious commander. During a war against the kingdom of Mithridates in the east, conflict erupted between Marius and Sulla over who should lead. For the first time in Rome's history, a Roman general marched his own legions into the city itself. Civil war broke out. Marius seized power briefly, then died. Sulla, ruthless and determined, returned to Rome and declared himself dictator. He unleashed bloody proscriptions, lists of enemies marked for execution and their wealth seized. Streets ran with the blood of senators and citizens alike. Yet Sulla also restructured the Republic, strengthening the Senate's authority in a bid to restore the old order. When he retired, claiming he had saved the Republic, Rome seemed calm once more. But the precedent had been set. Generals could rule with armies at their backs, and political violence had become a tool of power. The Republic had survived for now, but the next generation would see the rise of even greater figures, whose ambitions would shake Rome to its core. After Sulla's death, the Republic staggered forward, but the old balance of power was gone. Into the vacuum stepped men of immense ambition: Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, each seeking glory, wealth, and control of Rome's destiny. Pompey the Great earned his name through sweeping military victories. He crushed pirates who threatened trade across the Mediterranean and expanded Rome's influence into the east, conquering Syria and Judea. His triumphs dazzled the people, and for a time, he was the most celebrated man in Rome. Marcus Licinius Crassus, by contrast, was famed not for brilliance in war, but for his immense wealth. He built his fortune through shrewd deals, property, and ruthless exploitation. Crassus also made his mark by defeating Spartacus, leader of the most famous slave revolt in Roman history. Though Spartacus fell, the rebellion revealed the deep wounds festering within the Republic. And then there was Julius Caesar, charismatic, cunning, and ambitious. He began as a rising politician allied with the people. Caesar saw that to achieve greatness, he needed both military victories and popular support. Together, these 3 men formed an alliance later called the First Triumvirate. By combining their influence, Pompey's military fame, Crassus's money, and Caesar's political skill, they dominated Roman politics. For a time, it seemed unbreakable, but alliances in Rome rarely lasted. Caesar went to Gaul, waging a brilliant and brutal campaign that made him immensely powerful. Pompey grew closer to the Senate, while Crassus sought his own glory in the east, only to die in disaster at Carrhae, crushed by the Parthians. With Crassus gone, the fragile balance collapsed. Caesar's victories made him too powerful to ignore, and Pompey, once his ally, became his rival. Rome braced itself once again for civil war. By the late 50s BCE, Julius Caesar had become a legend. His conquest of Gaul brought him immense riches, loyal legions, and unmatched fame. He wrote of his victories in clear, commanding words, sending back dispatches that glorified both Rome and himself. To the people, he was a hero. To the Senate, he was a threat. Pompey, once his ally, now stood with the Senate. They feared Caesar's growing power and demanded that he disband his army before returning to Rome. To obey would mean surrendering his command and perhaps his life. To defy would mean war. In 49 BCE, Caesar made his choice. He led a single legion across a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. As his soldiers crossed, he uttered words that echoed through history. The die is cast. With that step, Caesar committed Rome to civil war. Pompey and the Senate fled the city, raising armies in Greece. Caesar advanced swiftly, taking Rome without bloodshed, then chasing his rivals across the Mediterranean. Battles followed, first in Spain, then in Greece. At Pharsalus in 48 BCE, Caesar faced Pompey directly. Despite being outnumbered, Caesar's disciplined legions triumphed. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge, but there he was betrayed and murdered. Caesar, upon arriving in Alexandria, wept at the sight of Pompey's severed head. His rival was gone, but the civil wars were not yet over. Caesar fought on, defeating enemies in the east and returning to Rome hailed as a conqueror. But Caesar was no longer just a general. He was becoming something greater and more dangerous. The Republic, fragile and battered, now bent beneath the will of a single man. When Caesar returned to Rome in triumph, he no longer hid his dominance. The Senate named him dictator for 10 years, and soon after, dictator for life. It was a title that alarmed many, for the Republic had always feared kingship. Yet Caesar wielded his power with both ambition and vision. He reformed Rome with sweeping measures. He reduced debt, restructured the calendar into the Julian calendar, the very foundation of the one we use today, and expanded citizenship to loyal allies across the empire. He planned massive building projects, colonies for veterans, and laws to ease poverty. To the common people, Caesar was a savior. But to the Senate's old guard, he was a tyrant in disguise. He wore a purple cloak, the color of kings. Statues were raised in his honor. Whispers spread that he might crown himself. For Rome, which had once expelled its kings with fury, this was intolerable. Among those who conspired against him were men who had once been his friends. Chief among them was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar trusted, and Gaius Cassius, bitter and calculating. Together, they gathered senators who feared the death of the Republic. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate chamber. There, the conspirators surrounded him. Blades flashed. Caesar fell, stabbed again and again by those he had called allies. When he saw Brutus among them, legend says he whispered, "Et tu, Brute?" And with that, he collapsed at the foot of Pompey's statue. The deed was done. The dictator was dead. The assassins believed they had saved the Republic. Instead, they unleashed chaos. Rome did not rejoice. The people mourned. Civil war loomed once more, and from the ashes of Caesar's death, new leaders would rise, men who would decide the fate of the Republic forever. The death of Julius Caesar plunged Rome into turmoil. The conspirators had struck to save the Republic, but instead, they left it trembling and leaderless. The people did not see them as liberators. They saw them as murderers. Caesar's funeral turned into a riot, stirred by the fiery words of Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally. Antony read Caesar's will aloud. revealing that Caesar had left money and land to the Roman people. The crowd, enraged by the loss of their champion, stormed the streets, burning the homes of the assassins. Brutus and Cassius fled east, gathering armies to defend their cause. But Caesar had prepared for the future. In his will, he named his great-nephew, Octavian, as his adopted son and heir. Octavian was young, just 19, but shrewd beyond his years. He arrived in Rome quietly, presenting himself not as a rival, but as Caesar's true successor. Tension grew between Antony and Octavian, but for a time, they found common ground. Along with Marcus Lepidus, a seasoned politician, they formed the Second Triumvirate, an alliance to avenge Caesar and restore order. Unlike the First Triumvirate, this one was official, backed by law and absolute power. Their first act was vengeance. Lists of enemies were drawn up. Proscriptions returned as men were hunted, their wealth seized, their families ruined. Among the victims was Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, who had dared to oppose Antony. His severed head was displayed in the Forum, a grim warning of what the triumvirs would tolerate. With Rome cowed, the triumvirs turned their eyes outward. Brutus and Cassius had raised legions in the east. The fate of the Republic would now be decided not in the Senate, but on the battlefield. In 42 BCE, the struggle for Rome's future reached its first climax. Brutus and Cassius, leaders of Caesar's assassins, had gathered powerful armies in the east. Facing them were the forces of the Second Triumvirate, Mark Antony and young Octavian. The two sides clashed in Macedonia, near the city of Philippi. The battle came in two great waves. In the first, Brutus's legions broke through Octavian's lines, forcing him to flee. But on the other side of the field, Antony crushed Cassius. Believing all was lost, Cassius took his own life, never knowing that Brutus still held half the field. Weeks later, the armies met again. This time, Antony and Octavian joined forces more effectively. Brutus fought bravely, but his legions were overwhelmed. Refusing capture, Brutus fell upon his own sword, ending the last hope of the so-called liberators. With Philippi, the Republic died its final death. The Senate was a shadow, powerless against generals and their armies. The triumvirs now ruled Rome unchecked. Yet even in victory, unity did not last. Lepidus soon faded into the background, leaving Antony and Octavian to divide the Roman world between them. Antony took the east, where he met Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Their alliance and their romance would shake the foundations of Rome. Octavian, meanwhile, strengthened his hold in the west. He cultivated loyalty, presenting himself as the protector of Roman tradition. Slowly, quietly, the inevitable clash between Antony and Octavian drew nearer. Two men, two visions, one destiny. Rome was once again on the path to civil war. After Philippi, the Roman world belonged to two men. Mark Antony ruled the wealthy east, while Octavian held the west. Their partnership was uneasy, bound only by necessity. At first, Antony cemented ties by marrying Octavian's sister, Octavia. Yet in the east, his path crossed with Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt, and everything changed. Cleopatra was brilliant, charismatic, and determined to preserve her kingdom's power. She and Antony became allies and soon lovers. Together, they envisioned a new order, with Alexandria, not Rome, as the heart of empire. Antony gave Cleopatra lands and titles, while she bore him children. To Octavian, this was not just betrayal of family, but betrayal of Rome itself. In Rome, Octavian played his part carefully. He portrayed himself as the guardian of Roman tradition, while Antony was painted as a man bewitched by a foreign queen. Octavian seized Antony's will, reading it publicly. It revealed Antony's desire to be buried in Alexandria beside Cleopatra. To the Roman people, this was treason. The Senate declared war, not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra, casting the struggle as a defense of Rome against foreign corruption. Yet everyone knew the truth. It was a war for mastery of the world. The final confrontation came in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, a naval clash off the coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra commanded a massive fleet, but Octavian's admiral, Agrippa, was a master of strategy. As the battle raged, Cleopatra suddenly withdrew with her ships. Antony followed, leaving the rest of his fleet to collapse. It was the end. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, their dream slipping away. Octavian, victorious, now stood as Rome's unchallenged ruler. But how would he wield this power? Rome had seen dictators before, but Octavian was more subtle. He would not call himself king. Instead, he would become something greater. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. After their defeat at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, hoping to rebuild their strength. Yet their power was broken, and Octavian pressed his advantage. By 30 BCE, his legions marched on Alexandria, bringing the war to its final stage. Antony, once the proud general of Rome, now found himself trapped. As Octavian's forces entered the city, he received false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life. Stricken with despair, Antony fell upon his sword. Wounded but not yet dead, he was carried to Cleopatra's chambers. There, the two lovers shared a final farewell before he breathed his last. Cleopatra's fate soon followed. Octavian sought to parade her as a captive in Rome, but the Queen of Egypt refused to be humiliated. Legend tells that she arranged her own death, perhaps by the bite of an asp hidden in a basket of figs, though the true method remains a mystery. With her passing, the line of the pharaohs ended, and Egypt became a Roman province. Octavian now held unrivaled power. The civil wars were over, and with them, the Republic was gone. Yet Octavian understood Rome's fear of kingship. He did not crown himself monarch. Instead, he cloaked his rule in tradition, presenting himself as the first citizen, princeps. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted him a new name, Augustus, meaning the revered one. It was a title of respect, yet behind it lay absolute authority. Augustus commanded the legions, controlled the provinces, and held the loyalty of the people. Rome had entered a new age, the empire. From the ashes of civil war, a new order rose, one that promised stability after decades of bloodshed. Yet the price was freedom, as power rested in the hands of one man. The Republic was no more. The Roman Empire had begun. With civil war ended and his rivals gone, Augustus began reshaping Rome into something lasting. Unlike Caesar, who had ruled too openly, Augustus mastered the art of subtlety. He never called himself king or dictator. Instead, he presented himself as a servant of the Republic. Even as he held supreme power, Augustus reformed the government, balancing appearances with control. Senators still met, magistrates were still elected, but real authority rested with him. He commanded the legions, oversaw the treasury, and directed foreign policy. Through careful design, he became the foundation of a system that would endure for centuries. Peace followed. After generations of civil war, the Roman world finally rested. This era came to be known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Roads stretched from Britain to Syria, trade flourished across the Mediterranean, and cities rose with forums, theaters, and aqueducts. Rome, once a small republic, was now the beating heart of an empire. Augustus also understood the power of image. He filled Rome with monuments, declaring, "I found Rome a city of brick. I leave it a city of marble." Poets like Virgil and Horace praised him, linking his rule to destiny itself. The image of Augustus, as both warrior and father of the nation, became central to Roman identity. Yet his reign was not without shadows. The succession weighed heavily. With no son to inherit, he turned to his stepson Tiberius, ensuring the dynasty's survival. The Principate, his careful balance of tradition and monarchy, was now the path forward. When Augustus died in 14 CE, he was mourned as Rome's savior. The Senate declared him a god, marking the beginning of the tradition of emperor worship. His reign had set the pattern. Rome would endure under emperors, for better or worse, for centuries to come. After Augustus, the empire passed to his stepson Tiberius. A skilled general, but a reluctant ruler, Tiberius governed with caution. He maintained Augustus's system, but his reign grew darker with time. Suspicion and fear spread, and Rome whispered of treason trials and secret informers. In his later years, Tiberius withdrew to the island of Capri, leaving Rome in the hands of ruthless advisors. Then came Caligula, remembered less for achievements than for madness. At first, the people adored him. He was young, generous, and the great-grandson of Augustus. But soon, his behavior shocked the empire. Stories tell of extravagance, cruelty, and bizarre acts, like naming his horse a priest or even a consul. Whether truth or rumor, his reign ended violently when the Praetorian Guard, Rome's imperial bodyguards, struck him down. After chaos, the throne passed to Claudius, uncle of Caligula. Awkward and underestimated, Claudius surprised many with his intelligence and energy. He expanded Rome's borders, conquering Britain and integrating new provinces. He also reformed administration, relying on freedmen to manage the vast empire. Yet palace intrigues plagued him, and poison, likely at the hands of his ambitious wife Agrippina, ended his rule. His successor was Nero, Claudius's stepson. At first, Nero was guided by wise advisors like Seneca. But as he grew older, his darker impulses took hold. He indulged in theater and spectacle, seeing himself as an artist more than a ruler. His reign was marked by scandal, executions, and extravagance. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE defined his rule. Flames consumed much of the city, and whispers claimed Nero himself had ordered it. Whether true or not, suspicion clung to him. He blamed Christians, beginning Rome's first persecution of the new faith. By 68 CE, rebellion swept the empire. Nero fled, abandoned by his guards. Facing capture, he took his own life, declaring, "What an artist dies in me." With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian line ended. Rome stood at a crossroads, about to be torn apart by new struggles for power. With Nero's death in 68 CE, the empire was thrown into chaos. For the first time, there was no clear heir, and power lay in the hands of whoever could command the legions. What followed was a storm of ambition, betrayal, and blood, the year of the four emperors. The first to claim power was Galba, governor of Spain. He marched to Rome with his troops and was hailed as emperor. But Galba's rule was harsh, and he quickly lost the support of both the soldiers and the people. Within months, he was cut down in the Forum, his head paraded through the streets. Next came Otho, once a supporter of Galba, who seized the throne. Yet his reign lasted only a few months. Another general, Vitellius, marched from Germany with his legions. Their forces clashed at the Battle of Bedriacum, where Otho was defeated. Rather than prolong the bloodshed, Otho chose to end his own life, leaving Vitellius in power. Vitellius, however, proved weak and indulgent. His feasting and neglect of discipline angered both Senate and army. Meanwhile, in the east, the legions proclaimed their general, Vespasian, as emperor. A seasoned commander who had fought in Britain and was then crushing a rebellion in Judea, Vespasian was pragmatic, disciplined, and respected. Vespasian's supporters marched on Rome. Vitellius tried to hold the city, but his forces collapsed. He was dragged through the streets and killed. By the end of 69 CE, Vespasian stood as the sole ruler. The chaos was over. The empire had survived the storm, and under Vespasian, stability would return. From his dynasty, the Flavians, Rome would rise again, building monuments of stone that still stand today. With Vespasian's rise, Rome at last found stability. A soldier of humble origins, he valued discipline, order, and practicality over spectacle. He restored the treasury, repaired the city after years of neglect, and reminded Romans that strength came from steady governance, not excess. One of his greatest legacies was the beginning of a grand amphitheater, built on the site of Nero's lavish palace gardens. It would be called the Flavian Amphitheater, though history remembers it as the Colosseum. Built for the people, it symbolized the return of Rome's focus on public life rather than imperial vanity. Vespasian's son, Titus, carried on his work. Titus is remembered not only for completing the Colosseum, but also for his humanity during disasters. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum in ash. Later, a great fire swept through Rome. Titus responded with relief efforts, winning the love of the people. His reign was short, but he was mourned as the darling of the human race. His brother Domitian followed. Unlike Titus, Domitian ruled with suspicion and fear. He strengthened the frontiers, fought campaigns in Germany and Britain, and demanded to be addressed as Lord and God. While effective as an administrator, his harshness and paranoia alienated the Senate. In 96 CE, he was assassinated, ending the Flavian line. Yet despite turmoil at the top, Rome continued to flourish. The empire stretched from the deserts of Syria to the hills of Britain, bound together by roads, aqueducts, and law. The Colosseum, where gladiators fought and crowds roared, stood as the emblem of Rome's might. From this foundation, a new age would begin, the era of the so-called Five Good Emperors, a time when Rome reached its height in power and prosperity. After the turmoil of Domitian's rule, Rome entered one of its most admired eras, the reign of the Five Good Emperors. From 96 to 180 CE, a succession of wise and capable rulers brought peace, prosperity, and stability across the empire. The first was Nerva, chosen by the Senate after Domitian's assassination. Though his reign was brief, Nerva set an important precedent. He adopted a worthy heir rather than leaving succession to chance. This decision would shape the golden age that followed. Nerva's heir was Trajan, a general beloved by the legions. Under Trajan, Rome reached its greatest territorial extent. His campaigns brought Dacia, modern Romania, into the empire, and the spoils funded magnificent works, including Trajan's Forum and his towering column, still standing in Rome today. He expanded roads, harbors, and aqueducts, binding the empire together in strength. Next came Hadrian, who chose consolidation over conquest. He abandoned some of Trajan's gains, preferring to strengthen the borders. His name is forever linked to Hadrian's Wall in Britain, a mighty barrier marking the edge of the Roman world. Hadrian traveled widely, inspecting provinces, encouraging culture, and leaving behind architectural marvels, such as the Pantheon's Great Dome. Hadrian was succeeded by Antoninus Pius, whose reign was marked by peace. Few wars disturbed his time, and his rule emphasized justice, stability, and prosperity. He became a model of calm leadership, remembered for ruling without cruelty or excess. The last of the five was Marcus Aurelius, philosopher and soldier. Known for his meditations on duty, wisdom, and the fleeting nature of life, Marcus embodied the idea of the philosopher king. Yet his reign was not easy. He faced wars along the Danube frontier and a devastating plague that swept through the empire. Still, he remained steady, earning the respect of his people. Together, these emperors represented Rome at its height, its borders vast, its cities thriving, its culture rich with art, literature, and philosophy. But even golden ages cannot last forever. After Marcus Aurelius, cracks began to appear once more. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, he broke with tradition by passing the throne not to an adopted heir, but to his biological son, Commodus. It was a decision that marked the end of the golden age of the Five Good Emperors. Commodus was the opposite of his father. Where Marcus valued philosophy and duty, Commodus craved spectacle and personal glory. He fancied himself a gladiator, often fighting in the arena before cheering crowds, though always under conditions that guaranteed his victory. He styled himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, posing with club and lion skin, and even renamed Rome in his own honor. But behind the theatrics lay neglect. Corruption flourished, conspiracies spread, and the Senate grew resentful of his arrogance. His obsession with games and vanity left governance to favorites and cronies. The stability built over a century began to falter. Eventually, conspirators within his court moved against him. In 192 CE, Commodus was strangled in his bath by an assassin. His death unleashed chaos. With no clear successor, generals and politicians scrambled for power. This ushered in another year of turmoil, the year of the Five Emperors, as rival claimants battled for control. Civil war once again tore through the empire. Out of this storm emerged a soldier emperor, Septimius Severus, founder of the Severan dynasty. Rome had survived another crisis, but the days of smooth succession and golden peace were gone. The empire would now be ruled largely by soldiers, their power rooted in the loyalty of legions rather than the will of the Senate. The age of emperors was shifting. Ahead lay centuries of brilliance and decay, conquest and collapse. Rome's story was far from over, but its golden harmony had ended. With the fall of Commodus, Rome looked once more to its armies for stability. In 193 CE, after bloody struggles, the legions of the Danube proclaimed Septimius Severus emperor. He marched on Rome, crushed his rivals, and founded the Severan dynasty. Severus was a soldier above all. He strengthened the army, raising pay and granting new privileges, ensuring their loyalty. He famously advised his sons, enrich the soldiers and scorn all others. Under his rule, the legions gained unprecedented power, and the balance of the empire shifted firmly toward military might. Severus expanded Rome's frontiers, waging campaigns in the east and in Britain, where he reinforced Hadrian's Wall and even pushed beyond it. Yet constant warfare drained the treasury, and the growing dependence on soldiers bred instability. Upon his death in 211 CE, Severus left the empire to his sons, Caracalla and Geta. Their rivalry ended swiftly. Caracalla murdered Geta and ruled alone. Brutal and ambitious, Caracalla is remembered for granting Roman citizenship to all free men in the empire, a sweeping reform that united diverse peoples under one law. But he also imposed heavy taxes and ruled with cruelty. His reign ended when he was assassinated by his own guards. The Severan dynasty staggered on, but corruption, intrigue, and bloodshed consumed it. By 235 CE, with the murder of Severus Alexander, the dynasty collapsed, plunging Rome into one of its darkest chapters. What followed was chaos, the crisis of the 3rd century. In this era, emperors rose and fell at a dizzying pace, often lasting only months. Civil war, invasions, and economic collapse nearly tore the empire apart. Rome had faced challenges before, but never had its survival seemed so fragile. From 235 to 284 CE, the Roman Empire spiraled into chaos. Historians call it the crisis of the 3rd century, a time when Rome nearly collapsed under the weight of its troubles. The empire faced enemies on every frontier. In the north, Germanic tribes like the Goths and Alemanni crossed the borders, raiding deep into Roman lands. In the east, the powerful Persian Empire pressed against Rome, capturing territory and even humiliating an emperor, Valerian, who was taken prisoner and used as a footstool by the Persian king. But the worst threat came from within. The loyalty of the legions became the key to power, and soldiers elevated general after general to the throne. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, more than 20 in 50 years, many dying violently. The empire fractured, with breakaway states like the Gallic Empire in the west and the Palmyrene Empire in the east carving out independence. Economy too crumbled. Constant wars drained resources, and emperors debased the coinage, causing rampant inflation. Fields went untended, trade faltered, and famine spread. For ordinary Romans, it must have seemed as though the empire's end was near. And yet, even in crisis, resilience appeared. Some emperors, though short-lived, fought valiantly to hold the empire together. Eventually, in the late 3rd century, leaders strong enough to restore order emerged. The greatest of them would be Diocletian, a soldier who understood that Rome could no longer be ruled as it had been. His reforms would reshape the empire, dividing its burdens and giving it new strength. But the Rome Diocletian saved would not be the Rome of old. Change was coming, change so deep it would transform the very soul of the empire. When Diocletian came to power in 284 CE, Rome was a fractured empire on the brink of collapse. Yet through discipline and vision, he rebuilt its foundations. Diocletian understood a truth others had ignored. The empire had grown too vast, too complex, for one man to govern alone. His solution was bold: the creation of the tetrarchy, or rule of four. He divided authority between two senior emperors, called Augusti, and two junior emperors, called Caesars. Together, they ruled the empire's four regions, each responsible for defense and administration. This system brought stability, allowing the empire to respond swiftly to threats on distant frontiers. Diocletian also reformed the army, fortifying borders and expanding the legions. He reorganized provinces, improved taxation, and attempted to stabilize the currency. His reforms brought order, though often at the cost of harsh control. One of his most lasting legacies was his persecution of Christians. Seeing their refusal to honor Rome's gods as dangerous to unity, Diocletian launched the Great Persecution, destroying churches and punishing believers. Yet this campaign failed to extinguish the faith. Instead, it hardened its resilience, preparing it for the rise it would soon achieve. In 305 CE, Diocletian did something no emperor before him had done. He voluntarily stepped down, retiring to a palace in Dalmatia to live out his days in peace. But the system he built could not endure without his strength. Rivalries flared, and once again, generals fought for supreme power. Out of this turmoil rose a figure greater still: Constantine, a man who would forever change the destiny of Rome by embracing a new faith and founding a new capital. After Diocletian's abdication, the carefully balanced tetrarchy unraveled. Rival emperors clashed, alliances shifted, and once again, Rome was torn by civil war. From this chaos emerged a man destined to reshape the empire, Constantine. Born the son of a Caesar, Constantine proved himself a skilled soldier and a shrewd strategist. His rise was gradual, but his moment came in 312 CE, when he marched against his rival Maxentius, who held Rome itself. The two armies met at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, just outside the city. Legend tells that on the night before battle, Constantine saw a vision in the sky, a cross of light, with the words in this sign, "Conquer." Taking it as divine guidance, he ordered his soldiers to mark their shields with the Christian symbol. The next day, Constantine's forces triumphed. Maxentius drowned in the Tiber, and Constantine entered Rome as its master. This victory was more than military. It was spiritual. Constantine credited his success to the Christian God, and soon after, he issued the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, granting religious tolerance across the empire. Christianity, once persecuted, now flourished under imperial protection. But Constantine's vision went beyond faith. He sought to secure the empire by building a new capital. On the site of the old Greek city of Byzantium, he laid the foundations of Constantinople, a city of walls, palaces, and domes set between Europe and Asia. It would become the jewel of the empire, the new Rome, and eventually outlast the old. By 324 CE, Constantine had defeated his last rivals, ruling as sole emperor. He was no longer just a military commander. He was the architect of a transformed empire, one in which Christianity and imperial power walked hand in hand. As sole ruler of the Roman world, Constantine reshaped the empire in ways that would echo for centuries. His reign was not only about conquest, but about vision of faith, governance, and unity. He strengthened the empire's administration, introducing new laws, taxes, and structures of authority. The Senate in Rome still existed, but real power shifted eastward to his new capital, Constantinople. Positioned between Europe and Asia, it became a crossroads of trade and culture, guarded by massive walls that would protect it for 1,000 years. Constantine also deepened the bond between empire and Christianity. He He supported the building of churches, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and the Old St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. To settle disputes within the growing faith, he convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, which sought to unify Christian belief under a single creed. Yet Constantine was not without contradictions. Though he elevated Christianity, he did not abolish traditional Roman religion entirely. Old temples stood alongside new churches, and Constantine himself was only baptized on his deathbed in 337 CE. Still, the path was clear. Christianity would become the soul of the empire. When Constantine died, his body was laid in a great church in Constantinople, surrounded by 12 empty sarcophagi symbolizing the apostles. In death, as in life, he cast himself as a ruler chosen by heaven. But after him, the empire once again fractured. His sons divided the realm, and though they carried forward his reforms, unity slipped away. Wars between brothers, renewed invasions, and mounting pressures on the frontiers all eroded the strength he had built. The Roman Empire would endure, but Constantine's age was the last moment it stood whole, proud, and unbroken. Ahead lay centuries of struggle and the slow decline of the West. After Constantine's death in 337 CE, his empire did not remain whole. His sons divided it among themselves, each taking a share of the vast realm. This division set a pattern that would shape Rome's future. The empire increasingly split between East and West. The Eastern Empire, ruled from Constantinople, grew wealthy and secure. Its cities thrived on trade, its walls were strong, and its culture blended Roman law with Greek language and Christian faith. Protected by geography and resources, the East would endure long after the West crumbled. The Western Empire, centered on Rome and later Ravenna, was less fortunate. Its frontiers stretched across vulnerable lands, Gaul, Spain, and Britain, constantly threatened by migrating tribes. Its economy weakened, its population shrank, and its armies, often filled with foreign mercenaries, grew less loyal. Religious tensions also stirred. Christianity spread rapidly, but debates over doctrine divided bishops and emperors alike. Councils were convened, creeds written, heresies condemned, yet unity was fragile. Still, the faith gave Rome a new identity, binding its people through belief even as politics faltered. The 4th century was marked by struggle. Emperors like Julian the Apostate briefly tried to restore the old gods, but Christianity proved too deeply rooted. Others, like Theodosius the Great, declared it the empire's official religion, ensuring its dominance. But while faith united, enemies pressed harder at the gates. Goths, Vandals, Huns, all surged toward Rome's borders, driven by need, ambition, or fear of other migrating peoples. Some were welcomed as allies, but others turned to conquest. The balance between East and West had shifted. The Eastern Empire was resilient, but the Western Empire was now vulnerable to storms it could no longer withstand. By the late 4th century, waves of pressure battered the Western Roman Empire. Tribes long held at the borders now surged inward, seeking land and survival. The most dramatic of these were the Goths, driven westward by the terrifying advance of the Huns from the steppes of Central Asia. At first, the Goths sought refuge within Roman lands, but poor treatment by corrupt officials pushed them into revolt. In 378 CE, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman Emperor Valens faced them head-on. It was a disaster. The Roman army was annihilated, and Valens himself was killed on the field. The battle shocked the empire. It was one of Rome's worst defeats since canny centuries before. The Goths, now established within the empire, roamed as both foes and uneasy allies. Rome was no longer the undisputed master of its world. Then came the Huns, led by their fearsome king Attila. Ruthless and swift, Attila earned the title Scourge of God. His armies swept through the Balkans, raided Gaul, and even threatened Italy itself. Rome trembled, but fortune spared the city. Attila turned back in 452 CE, dying soon after. Other tribes pressed in, Vandals crossed in North Africa, seizing Carthage and cutting off Rome's grain supply. In 455 CE, they sailed across the Mediterranean and sacked Rome itself. Though the city was spared total destruction, its humiliation was complete. Meanwhile, Britain was abandoned, Gaul fragmented, and Spain fell to new rulers. The empire's frontiers had collapsed. The West was now a patchwork of Roman provinces and barbarian kingdoms. The East, stronger and wealthier, endured, but the West was staggering toward its final collapse. Only a few more emperors remained, shadow figures in a fading world. By the mid-5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a shell of its former glory. Emperors rose and fell quickly, often little more than puppets of powerful generals or barbarian warlords. The Senate still met, laws were still proclaimed, but true authority slipped away. The once mighty city of Rome itself was no longer the empire's center. Power shifted to Ravenna, a safer capital protected by marshes and walls. Yet even there, the emperors were weak. Real strength lay in the hands of men like Ricimer, a barbarian general who made and unmade emperors at will. By 476 CE, the end had come. The last Western emperor was a boy named Romulus Augustulus, ironically bearing the names of both Rome's founder, Romulus, and its first emperor, Augustus. He held no real power. The Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed him, sending the imperial insignia to Constantinople. The Western Roman Empire, after centuries of triumph and turmoil, was no more. The fall was quiet compared to Rome's grandeur. No final battle marked the end. No grand ceremony closed the curtain. Instead, the empire dissolved piece by piece until the name alone remained. The eternal city, once master of the world, was now just another prize in the hands of new rulers. Yet Rome's legacy did not vanish. Its roads, laws, language, and faith endured. In the East, the Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome, would carry the torch for another 1,000 years. In the West, medieval kingdoms would rise upon the ruins, still calling themselves heirs of Rome's greatness. Thus ended the Western Empire, but not the story of Rome. For in many ways, Rome never truly died. Though the Western Empire crumbled in 476 CE, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call the Byzantine Empire, remained strong. From its capital at Constantinople, it carried on Rome's traditions of law, administration, and empire, even as the West entered the so-called Dark Ages. The Eastern emperors ruled over a wealthy, vibrant realm. Trade from Asia, Africa, and Europe flowed through Constantinople's harbors. Its walls, mighty and unbroken, guarded the city from invaders for centuries. Greek became the language of government, but Roman law and identity endured. One of its greatest rulers was Justinian I in the 6th century. He dreamed of restoring the whole Roman world. His brilliant general, Belisarius, reconquered North Africa from the Vandals and parts of Italy from the Goths. For a moment, it seemed the empire might reunite. Justinian also left lasting marks in law and architecture. His Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, organized centuries of Roman legal tradition into a single code, influencing European law for generations. And in Constantinople, he built the majestic Hagia Sophia, its vast domes soaring above the city like a vision of heaven. Yet the Eastern Empire faced constant trials. Wars against Persians, Slavs, and later Arabs tested its strength. The rise of Islam in the 7th century brought new powers that seized much of the empire's territory. Still, Constantinople stood firm, shielded by its walls, its wealth, and its faith. The Byzantine Empire would last nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the West. In it, Rome lived on, transformed, Christian and Greek-speaking, but still the heir of Augustus and Constantine. The story of Rome, then, was not one of simple fall, but of transformation. The empire's heart had shifted east, where it continued to beat for centuries. After Justinian's ambitious reconquests, the Eastern Empire gradually settled into a long, often difficult twilight. Though Rome itself was lost, Constantinople remained the beacon of imperial power, its walls defying armies that battered against them for centuries. The empire was tested by wave after wave of enemies. In the 7th century, the newly risen Arab caliphates swept across the Middle East and North Africa, seizing lands once held by Rome. Yet Constantinople, protected by its great Theodosian walls and the fiery weapon known as Greek fire, withstood sieges that might have ended lesser empires. Through the centuries, Byzantium endured cycles of strength and weakness. Some emperors were wise and capable, restoring lands and stabilizing the state. Others were inept or cruel, leaving the empire vulnerable to rivals. Still, it persisted, an unbroken line calling itself Roman, even as the world around it changed. By the 11th century, however, new dangers emerged. The Seljuk Turks struck at Byzantine lands, and the empire's call for aid helped spark the Crusades. At first, crusading armies marched east to fight Islam, but soon they turned on Byzantium itself. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople, leaving the empire shattered and humiliated. Though it recovered somewhat, the empire never regained its former strength. Over time, its land shrank until little remained beyond Constantinople and a few scattered territories. Finally, in 1453, the Ottoman Turks, armed with gunpowder cannons, breached the city's mighty walls. Constantinople fell, and with it, the last vestige of the Roman Empire ended. Yet even in that moment, Rome's legacy did not vanish. It lived on in law, in language, in architecture, in Christianity, and in the very idea of empire. From a small cluster of huts on the Tiber to a realm that lasted more than 2,000 years, Rome had reshaped the world. As the last walls of Constantinople fell in 1453, it might have seemed that Rome's story was finally over. But in truth, Rome never truly died. Its legacy stretched across centuries, woven into the very fabric of Europe and beyond. Rome's law endured through Justinian's codification, shaping legal systems in Europe and inspiring ideas of justice and order even into the modern age. Its roads and aqueducts, though weathered, laid the groundwork for infrastructure and trade. The Latin language evolved into Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, the Romance languages still spoken by millions. Its political ideals, though flawed, influenced the very notion of republics and senates. Centuries later, thinkers of the Renaissance and Enlightenment would look back to Roman history for lessons on governance, liberty, and tyranny. Rome's faith also carried forward. The Christianity once persecuted by emperors became the dominant religion of Europe, preserved and spread by the Roman Catholic Church. The Pope in Rome stood as a spiritual heir to the emperors, his voice echoing through the ages. And in memory, Rome remained a symbol. Kings, emperors, and nations all claimed to be its heirs. The Holy Roman Empire in medieval Germany, the czars of Russia calling themselves Caesars, even modern states tracing their identity to Rome's shadow. For centuries, poets, scholars, and dreamers whispered of Rome as the eternal city, the empire without end. Its ruins still stand as silent teachers. The Colosseum, the Forum, aqueducts arching across valleys, reminders of ambition, glory, and the cost of empire. Thus, the story of Rome is not only of rise and fall, but of transformation. From myth to monarchy, republic to empire, decline to legacy, Rome shaped the world we know. And so, as the lecture winds down, imagine the city by the Tiber, quiet under the stars, its marble columns gleaming in moonlight. Though empires pass, Rome's story endures, an eternal echo across time. As we drift toward the close of this long journey, the story of Rome softens into reflection. Empires rise and empires fall, but few leave marks as deep as Rome's. It began with shepherds and warriors on a hillside, with myths of wolves and brothers, and grew into the mightiest force the ancient world had ever seen. Rome endured kings, consuls, senators, generals, emperors, and conquerors. It tasted glory at Zama, despair at Adrianople, triumph under Augustus, and ruin under invaders. It built aqueducts that still stand, carved laws that still shape justice, and inspired ideas of citizenship and governance that echo in republics today. Even in collapse, Rome was never truly gone. Its flame carried eastward to Constantinople, then into the hands of popes, emperors, and kings who all claimed its mantle. In language, in law, in architecture, and in faith, Rome still whispers. And perhaps that is why we call it the Eternal City. Not because its stones are unbroken, but because its memory lives in every age that followed. As you rest, let the voices of history fade like the footsteps of legions along forgotten roads. The story of Rome is vast, but in its rise and fall, it tells us something timeless. That power is fleeting, but legacy endures. Sleep now, as the marble columns sink into the night, and the Tiber flows quietly past. Rome remains, eternal, in the dreams of the world. Even after its fall, Rome continued to shape the path of civilizations. Its legacy was not only in battles fought or emperors crowned, but in the ideas, structures, and inspirations it left behind for all who came after. In architecture, Rome's genius still surrounds us. Arches, domes, and concrete construction spread far beyond the empire. The Colosseum inspired stadiums. Aqueducts became the model for modern water systems. The Pantheon's dome remains a marvel, a whisper of engineering brilliance that has yet to fade. In law and government, Rome's contributions endure in courts and constitutions. The concept of written codes, of rights and responsibilities, of checks on power, all trace their roots back to the Republic and its struggles between Senate, consul, and people. Even today, nations carry echoes of Rome in their institutions. In language, Latin never truly disappeared. It became the seed from which the Romance languages grew, and it remained the tongue of scholars, priests, and thinkers for centuries. To study medicine, law, or science long after Rome's fall was to speak in Latin. Its rhythm still lingers in our words. In faith, Christianity flourished in Rome's shadow, nurtured first by persecution, then by patronage, until it became the dominant spiritual force of Europe. Cathedrals rose where temples once stood, saints replaced heroes, and the cross replaced the eagle. But the structure of Rome's empire gave Christianity its reach. In memory, Rome became the measure of greatness. To call something imperial, to dream of universal rule, was to dream of Rome reborn. From the Holy Roman Empire to modern capitals filled with neoclassical pillars, Rome's ghost walks still among us. Thus, Rome's greatest gift was not conquest, but continuity. Its ideas, its culture, and its spirit traveled across centuries, finding new homes in new lands. And so, Rome lives, not just in ruins, but in the very foundations of the world we know. The tale of Rome, long and winding, now draws to its close. From a shepherd's hut on the Palatine Hill to the glittering domes of Constantinople, Rome's journey spans centuries, filled with triumph and turmoil, wisdom and folly. Its legions marched across continents. Its laws ordered societies. Its arches framed the sky. And though the empire itself has long since faded, its essence remains, woven into language, into cities, into the ways we govern and dream. Tonight, as the story settles into silence, picture Rome not as fallen ruins, but as a quiet flame. A torch passed from age to age, still glowing, still guiding. The marble temples may crumble, but the idea endures. The Eternal City whispers not of conquest, but of continuity. Let your mind drift like the Tiber beneath moonlight, steady and eternal. Let the voices of emperors, senators, and soldiers fade into the distance, until only calm remains. For Rome's story is not just history. It is memory, echo, and dream. And now, with the echoes softened, you may rest, carried gently into sleep by the timeless river of Rome. As the story fades into calm reflection, let us linger on the images that Rome left behind, symbols that speak softly across centuries. Imagine the Colosseum, its arches rising in graceful circles. Once filled with roaring crowds and the clash of gladiators, it now stands in quiet dignity, a skeleton of stone against the sky. In silence, it teaches us of ambition, of spectacle, and of time's gentle erosion. Picture the Forum, the beating heart of the Republic and Empire. Senators once debated there, generals celebrated their triumphs, merchants sold their wares. Today its columns stand broken, scattered like memories across the earth. Yet in those ruins lies the pulse of politics and power that still guides us. See the long lines of aqueducts, carrying water across valleys on endless arches. They are not only monuments of stone, but of practicality, of human ingenuity turning vision into reality. Even in ruin, they remind us that Rome was not just about empire, but about the art of making life flourish. And then the roads, stretching straight toward the horizon, built by countless hands. They carried soldiers, merchants, ideas, and faith, binding the empire together. Some still remain, worn by centuries, yet steady beneath the tread of modern travelers. These symbols are not only relics, they are anchors of memory. They whisper that nothing is eternal in form, but that spirit can live on. So as you rest, hold these images gently in your mind. Arches in moonlight, marble softened by time, stones warmed by the sun. Rome's monuments are not only for the eye, but for the heart, a reminder that greatness fades, yet leaves behind beauty to dream upon. And now, at the end of this long journey, let the story rest. Rome has carried us across centuries, through battles and triumphs, emperors and ruins, dreams and legacies. Yet history, like the night, must find its quiet close. Imagine the city by the Tiber under starlight. The stones are cool, the columns silent, the streets empty of marching feet. Where once legions thundered, now only the whisper of wind moves through broken arches. Rome is at peace. The eternal city does not speak in voices of conquest anymore, but in calm reminders that greatness rises and falls, that power fades, but that memory endures. Its story is a river, sometimes fierce, sometimes still, always flowing forward. Let that river carry you now. Drift with it, gently, past the Colosseum in the moonlight, past the aqueducts stretching like shadows across the hills, past the domes and ruins softened by time. Each is a lullaby, each a breath of history settling into silence. As your eyes grow heavy, remember that Rome's gift is not only its grandeur, but its reminder of continuity. Life moves on, ages shift, but the echoes of the past remain to guide and comfort. Sleep now, as Rome itself sleeps. Its story has been told. Unlike the empire, it rests eternal, timeless, enduring, and calm. Now that the story is told, let us leave behind battles and emperors and walk instead through a dream of Rome at rest. Picture yourself wandering quiet streets paved with ancient stones. Lanterns glow faintly, casting soft light on marble columns. The voices of the past are hushed. Only the rhythm of your footsteps accompanies you. The city is vast, but it feels gentle, like a cradle of time itself. You pass the Colosseum, its arches silvered by the moon. Once it roared with crowds, but now it is a hollow shell, filled only with the sound of night breezes. It stands not as a monument to violence, but as a reminder that all noise fades into silence. Farther along, you come to the Forum, where crumbled temples lean toward the stars. Imagine the debates and laughter, the proclamations and applause, all melted away, leaving only stillness. The stones rest now as you do. Beyond the city, aqueducts stretch like arms across valleys, their arches dissolving into mist. Water once flowed there, bringing life to millions, but in your dream, They are bridges of memory, carrying you softly into calm. At last, you approach the Tiber. Its waters flow gently, dark and endless. You sit by the riverbank, the night sky mirrored on its surface. The current is slow, steady, eternal. Like Rome, it moves quietly, carrying the past into the sea of forever. Close your eyes here. Let the river's lull carry you deeper into rest. The empire's story has ended, but its dreams remain vast and calm, waiting for you in sleep. Last, the story of Rome settles into silence. The legions are gone. The emperors sleep in their tombs. The marble has crumbled into dust. And yet, the spirit of Rome lingers, soft, eternal, like a whisper carried on the night air. Close your eyes and imagine the eternal city under stars. No crowds, no torches, no voices, only the moonlight spilling across ruins and quiet streets. The arches of the Colosseum curve like shadows. The columns of the Forum stand like sentinels in the dark. Time has stilled them, but they remain gentle reminders of all that has passed. Beyond the city, the Tiber River flows. Its current is unhurried, its song steady. Once it bore ships, now it bears only reflections of moon, of memory, of calm. Let its rhythm lull you, a soft tide pulling you deeper into rest. Rome's tale is vast, but here it becomes simple. It is not a story of power, but of continuity. Not a story of conquest, but of memory. The empire has ended, yet its echo endures like a heartbeat that never fades. And so, with this final breath of history, let yourself drift. Let the empire's voice dissolve into night. Rome is at peace, and so are you. Sleep now beneath the eternal stars. The history is complete. The lecture is done. Rome rests, and so may you. Now the lecture becomes only a whisper, softer than breath, gentler than time. The story of Rome has ended, but in dreams it still lingers, like a candle flame flickering in endless night. Picture the Forum beneath starlight, its broken columns glowing pale against the sky. Grass grows between the stones, and silence fills the air where once senators debated. The world has moved on, yet here the past rests, untroubled, serene. The Colosseum rises in the distance, not as a place of battle, but as a cradle of echoes. Its arches curve like waves, steady and endless. You walk past it slowly, feeling only calm, as if the great monument itself breathes peace into the night. Beyond the walls, Roman roads stretch outward, vanishing into mist. Once they carried legions, now they carry nothing but memory. They remind you that every path leads forward, and every journey finds rest. The river flows quietly still, carrying reflections of moon and stars. Its song is soft, steady, eternal. You listen, and in its rhythm, your own heart slows, matching its ancient beat. Rome, at last, is not an empire or a city, but a dream, timeless, gentle, eternal. Let it cradle you now, carrying you further into rest, where history fades into silence, and silence into sleep. The dream drifts further, softer now, as if history itself exhales. Rome is no longer a city of power, but of quiet shadows. The arches you see are faint silhouettes against the night sky, their edges blurred by time. Once they carried triumphal processions, now they carry only starlight. They stand not in victory, but in peace. The temples are hushed. Their columns, weathered and worn, seem less like ruins and more like guardians, keeping silent watch over centuries. Within them, no prayers rise, no incense burns. Only the calm of still air, filled with the memory of countless voices now at rest. The roads lie empty, winding through fields kissed by moonlight. No wheels, no footsteps, no soldiers, just the gentle hum of night insects and the feeling that the earth itself remembers. These stones were laid for eternity, and in eternity they remain. Above it all, the stars shine, the same stars the Romans once looked upon. They outlasted kings, consuls, emperors, and legions. And now they watch over you, too, as you sink into calm, into quiet, into sleep. Rome's story is done, yet its peace continues. An endless night where nothing is lost, only remembered. Now the story has become only a lullaby, carried on the breeze that drifts through Rome's forgotten stones. No armies march, no voices argue, no crowds roar. Only the stillness of night remains. The Colosseum rests as a hollow shell, its arches dark against the sky. You can almost hear the hush of centuries within its walls, like a great heart that has finally slowed, beating only in memory. The Forum is quiet, its broken marble glowing faintly in moonlight. Where once laws were spoken and decisions made for the world, now grass grows gently and silence reigns. Time has laid its hand softly across the stones, and the city accepts the touch. Far away, aqueducts stride across valleys, arches fading into mist. No water flows now, yet they seem alive, bridges not of stone, but of memory. They carry not rivers, but dreams, spanning centuries with grace. The Tiber whispers as it passes, steady and calm. Its current carries with it all the weight of history, triumphs, sorrows, beginnings, endings, smoothing them into a single endless song. And above it all, the stars shine as they always have, steady guardians of time. Rome lies beneath them, not as empire, but as echo, as dream. Let these images cradle you. Let them blur into quietness, until history itself becomes sleep, and sleep becomes peace. The dream is nearly still now, softened into its final moments. Rome no longer rises in triumph, nor falls in ruin. It simply rests, a gentle presence in the quiet of night. The arches of its aqueducts stretch across shadowed fields, glowing faintly under moonlight. They are not broken, but eternal, carrying silence instead of water, carrying time itself toward the horizon. The Colosseum stands as a hushed circle of stone. No crowd gathers, no battle is fought. Only the night wind moves through its arches, turning them into a song of calm, a breath as steady as sleep. The temples and columns stand like silhouettes, neither proud nor fallen, but serene. They are reminders not of power, but of patience. Time has smoothed their edges, and in that smoothing, they have become gentle. The Tiber flows endlessly, its dark waters glinting with starlight. It carries the story of Rome with it, a story too vast for words, yet soft enough now to be a lullaby. And so Rome whispers, no longer of empire or conquest, but of stillness, of memory, of eternity. Let that whisper guide you, like the current of the river, carrying you deeper into rest. The story has become peace. The empire has become dream. Now, the story of Rome reaches its quietest moment. No longer a tale of kings, or senators, or emperors, but a gentle hush, settling across time. The eternal city lies under starlight. Its arches are shadows, its columns soft silhouettes. The stones no longer speak of power. They breathe only calm. The echoes of legions and voices have faded into silence, leaving only peace behind. The Tiber River flows as it always has, steady and unbroken. It carries the memory of centuries, smoothing them into a single endless lullaby. In its rhythm, you hear not history, but eternity. Above, the stars shine as they did when Rome was born, as they did when it fell, and as they do now. They watch in silence, constant and serene, as ages pass beneath them. Rome does not end. It rests, not as an empire, not as a city, but as a dream, an eternal whisper within the night. And so, let the story close. Let the journey fade. The history has been told, the echoes have softened, and the eternal city now sleeps. May you, too, drift into rest, quiet, calm, eternal, carried gently by the last whisper of Rome. Though the story has ended, the dream drifts on. Rome is no longer a city of stone, but a feeling, a quiet presence that lingers beyond the boundaries of time. The arches dissolve into mist, their shapes becoming light. The roads stretch endlessly forward, not of stone anymore, but of stars, leading into eternity. The Colosseum glimmers like a hollow crown upon the earth, no longer echoing with voices, but with silence as soft as breath. The Forum fades into a meadow of memory, its broken pillars now gentle markers of what once was and what always will be. Continuity, endurance, legacy. And above all, the night sky opens vast and endless. It is the same sky the Romans once gazed upon, the same sky you see now. Time bends beneath its stars. Empires rise, empires fall, but the heavens remain, eternal guardians over fleeting ages. In this dream, Rome becomes not a place, not a time, but an eternal echo, woven into the fabric of history, into the stillness of the night, into the calm that carries you toward rest. Sleep now, as the dream carries you beyond walls, beyond rivers, beyond centuries. Rome has become eternity, and eternity is peace. The dream drifts deeper, where Rome is no longer ruins or monuments, but a gentle silence spread across eternity. The Colosseum is no longer stone. It is a circle of light suspended in the night, glowing softly like a lantern. Its arches hum faintly, not with cheers or cries, but with a lullaby of stillness. The roads stretch outward, but now they lead nowhere and everywhere at once. They fade into starlight, paths of memory guiding dreamers across the ages. Every step upon them feels weightless, as though the stones themselves are clouds. The aqueducts arc like bridges of moonlight, carrying not water, but the calm of time itself. They seem endless, spanning valleys of dream, reminders of how far Rome reached and how gently it rests now. The Tiber flows quietly still, but in this dream it is no longer bound to earth. It drifts upward into the stars, a river of light, carrying Rome's story beyond the world into forever. Rome itself has become a vast silence, not heavy, but comforting, an empire of calm, where every echo has softened into peace. Here, history itself rests, and you, too, may rest within it, cradled by the eternal city's final hush. The silence deepens, and Rome becomes less a city than a constellation, an empire written across the night sky. The arches are starlit bridges, shimmering above you as though the heavens themselves remember the shape of Rome. They are not ruins, but patterns, glowing gently, guiding dreamers through time. The Forum drifts like a meadow of stars, its columns rising as slender beams of light. Each one carries the echo of a voice. Debates, laughter, promises, all soften now into a harmony too quiet to disturb the night. The Colosseum appears as a silver ring, vast and weightless, turning slowly above the earth. It is not an arena anymore, but a crown of memory, glimmering softly, as if Rome itself has become part of the cosmos. The Tiber winds upward as a river of light, carrying fragments of the eternal city into the sky. Its current is steady, carrying history into dream, dream into silence, silence into peace. Rome is no longer bound to earth. It is everywhere now, in the stars, in the whispers of night, in the calm that folds gently around you. And as you drift with it, you find rest. Rome's empire has become not conquest, but comfort. Not power, but peace. The dream is nearly still. Rome shines not as marble, nor as empire, but as a soft light, flickering gently across eternity. The Colosseum is now only a faint circle upon the horizon, glowing like a halo. No sound remains, only a hush as wide as the night itself. The Forum is a garden of memory, where broken stones bloom as quiet stars. Every column, every arch is softened, transformed in a light that drifts upward into the sky. The roads dissolve into silver threads, winding endlessly into nothingness, carrying no armies, no burdens, only calm. They are pathways for rest, leading you deeper into peace. The Tiber no longer flows through the earth. It has become part of the night sky, a stream of quiet brightness, carrying Rome's story far beyond time, until it merges with the stars. And so, Rome's empire has become eternal not in power, but in peace. Its story closes like a book gently shut, its weight resting lightly, its echoes softened into comfort. Now, as the last light of Rome glimmers in the distance, let yourself drift with it, carried by its calm, into stillness, into dream, into sleep. And now, the story of Rome closes at last. No more battles, no more emperors, no more echoes of power, only quiet, soft as nightfall. The eternal city lies at rest. Its arches are shadows, its stones are dreams, its voice a whisper carried on the wind. The Colosseum glimmers faintly, the Forum drifts in silence, and the Tiber flows not through earth, but through memory. Rome has become what it was always meant to be, not an empire of conquest, but an empire of remembrance. Not an empire of noise, but of stillness. It lives on not in marble, but in the gentle pulse of history, in the dream of continuity that outlasts all time. Above it all, the stars shine, unchanged, eternal, watching as they always have. They remind us that empires rise, empires fall, but peace remains. So let Rome rest. Let its story settle, like dust upon the stones, like sleep upon your eyes. The lecture has ended. The journey is complete, and all that remains is calm. Close your eyes now. Drift with the river of time, steady and endless. Rome sleeps, and so may you, quiet, eternal, at peace. Though the lecture has ended, the dream drifts on, gentler than memory, lighter than time. Rome is no longer a place at all, but a presence, carried quietly beyond history. The arches dissolve into light, not stone, rising softly into the sky. They are no longer monuments, but constellations, patterns that guide the dreaming mind into peace. The roads no longer bind the earth. They float across the night like silver threads, connecting stars, leading everywhere and nowhere, pathways for dreamers. The Colosseum is now a ring of starlight, weightless and calm. It no longer holds crowds or battles, only stillness, a crown of silence upon the horizon. The Tiber is not a river anymore, but a stream of eternity, flowing endlessly into the quiet sea of stars. Its current carries Rome, and with it, you, drifting into timeless rest. Rome has passed beyond history. It is not gone, but transformed into calm, into memory, into dream. And in that dream, it cradles you too, guiding you deeper, softer, ever closer to eternal peace. The dream carries you further still, softer than breath, lighter than starlight. Rome no longer feels like a city, nor even a memory. It has become a silence, wide and endless. The arches are faint outlines against the night, their shapes dissolving into the sky until they are more suggestion than stone. They no longer hold weight, they are simply calm. The roads are gone from earth, yet you sense them beneath you. Threads of quietness, invisible paths leading you deeper into peace. Once they bore legions, now they carry only stillness. The Forum is a meadow now, its stones absorbed into the soil, its columns leaning like shadows. The voices that once filled it have melted into the breeze, too faint to disturb the night. The Colosseum is an echo, its great circle no longer heavy with stone but drawn in silver light, drifting like a halo across the horizon. It hums faintly, not with applause, but with the rhythm of sleep. The Tiber flows quietly into eternity. It carries no ships, no burdens, no history, only rest. Its waters are time itself, endless, gentle, eternal. Rome has passed fully into silence, and in that silence it offers peace. The empire is gone, the story is finished, yet the quiet remains. Let it carry you now, further and further, until you, too, drift into the eternal sleep of Rome. The eternal city no longer belongs to history. It belongs to dreams. In this quiet vision, Rome is not broken, not fallen, not lost. It is simply transformed, softened into something weightless and serene. The arches shimmer faintly, as though carved from moonlight. They stand not as ruins, but as gateways, opening into silence, inviting you deeper into calm. The roads no longer stretch across lands, but across the stars. Each one is a pathway of light, leading into infinity, where time itself feels still. You follow them not with your feet, but with your breath, drifting gently forward. The Colosseum is no longer a monument of stone. It is a circle of light suspended above the horizon, a crown of memory glowing softly against the night sky. Its echo is no longer thunder. It is a whisper guiding you toward rest. The Forum is now a garden of shadows where the past sleeps. The stones do not speak, they sigh. The columns are no longer broken, they are dreaming. The Tiber has become a ribbon of silver, winding endlessly into the distance. It carries all of Rome's history within it, yet its waters are still, its current steady, its song a lullaby for eternity. And so, the dreaming city drifts beyond reach. Rome is no longer empire, nor ruin, nor memory. It is peace itself. And in that peace, you find sleep. The dream carries you gently toward its end. Rome, once vast and unyielding, is now weightless, an outline against the horizon of eternity. The arches gleam faintly like doorways into calm. They no longer belong to earth. They belong to silence, standing as symbols of patience rather than power. The roads are threads of silver light, stretching not across provinces but across the stars. They lead to no battles, no destinations, only to rest. Each path feels like a breath, long and steady, drawing you deeper into peace. The Colosseum has become a circle of twilight, its edges dissolving into the night sky. It holds no echoes now, only stillness, like a cradle rocking softly in eternity. The Forum is a field of shadows, its stones sinking into the soil, its columns leaning as if they, too, are ready to sleep. Once it was the voice of the empire, now it is a whisper of quiet dreams. The Tiber glows softly, no longer a river of water, but a ribbon of time, winding endlessly into the horizon. Its current carries the last fragments of Rome's story into the sea of stars. At the quiet horizon, Rome becomes not history, not ruin, but eternal calm. Its weight has lifted, leaving only gentleness behind. And as it rests, so do you. Now at last the journey is complete. Rome, whose story has carried us across centuries, settles into its final rest. No more emperors, no more battles, no more echoes of power, only silence, soft and endless. The arches fade into starlight, dissolving gently into the night. The roads vanish into silver threads, stretching into infinity, until they are nothing but calm. The Colosseum drifts as a quiet halo, a circle of light resting upon the horizon. The Forum sleeps beneath the stars, its stones embraced by earth, its voices hushed forever. The Tiber flows steadily into eternity, its current carrying Rome's story to the sea of time. In its waters, triumph and ruin, hope and sorrow, all become one, smoothed into peace. Above it all, the stars shine, as they always have, as they always will. They watched Rome rise, they watched it fall, and they watch still, eternal and unbroken. Rome has not vanished. It has simply transformed into memory, into silence, into dream. It is no longer empire, but eternity. And so, the lecture ends. The story is told. The eternal city sleeps, and in its rest, it carries you too. Close your eyes now. Let Rome's eternal calm surround you. Sleep gently, deeply, peacefully, carried forever by the last whisper of Rome. an assembly of elders whose wisdom would advise rulers for generations. He also organized Rome's people into tribes and clans, giving them order and identity. But Romulus was also a warrior, and Rome's earliest expansion came through both diplomacy and force. After him came Numa Pompilius, remembered not for battles, but for peace. He was said to be wise and deeply spiritual, credited with bringing sacred rituals, priesthoods, and the calendar of festivals. In his reign, Rome grew closer to the gods, learning to see itself as a chosen people under divine guidance. Other kings followed. Tullus Hostilius, fierce in war, who destroyed the rival city of Alba Longa. Then Ancus Marcius, who built Rome's first bridge across the Tiber and extended its lands toward the sea. Tarquin the Elder, Servius Tullius, and Tarquin the Proud each added power and grandeur, with temples rising and city walls stretching higher. Yet, the age of kings would not last. Rome's final monarch, Tarquin the Proud, ruled with arrogance and cruelty. His tyranny and the dishonor brought upon noble families sparked rebellion. The people of Rome, weary of one man holding all power, cast off their king. In his place, they forged something new, something rare in the ancient world. Rome would no longer be a kingdom. It would become a republic. When Tarquin the Proud was driven from the city, a great change swept through Rome. No longer would a single king rule with unchecked power. Instead, the Romans created a system that balanced authority between many hands. This was the birth of the Republic, around 509 BCE. At the heart of this new order stood two consuls, elected officials who shared power. Each could command armies, pass laws, and preside over the Senate, but neither could act without the other. This careful balance was meant to prevent tyranny from returning. The Senate itself, once only advisors to kings, now became the steady voice of the Republic. Composed of Rome's wealthiest and most influential men, it guided policy, debated law, and represented the long memory of the city. Yet, it was not democracy as we know it today. Power still lay in the hands of the patricians, the aristocratic families. Still, Rome's common people, the plebeians, would not remain silent. They labored, they fought in the legions, and they demanded a voice. Through protest and persistence, they won the right to elect tribunes, officials who could protect them from injustice by shouting a single word, veto, meaning I forbid. The Republic was not perfect, but it was resilient. Its citizens believed in duty, discipline, and honor. They called this mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. It was tradition, custom, and the spirit of Rome itself. And under this system, the city began to grow, not just in size, but in ambition. Soon, Rome would look beyond its hills and riverbanks, seeking to defend itself, conquer rivals, and expand its influence across Italy. With the Republic established, Rome turned outward. Surrounded by rival tribes and cities, survival meant more than defense. It demanded conquest. Step by step, Rome began to expand across the Italian peninsula. At first, its enemies were close: the Latin tribes, the Sabines, the Etruscans. Each war tested Rome's discipline, but each victory brought new allies. And here was Rome's genius, not only in winning battles, but in binding others to its cause. Instead of destroying conquered peoples, Rome often offered them a place within its system. Some became citizens, others allies. All, however, were tied to Rome's destiny. Through this approach, Rome built a network of roads and colonies that stretched like veins across Italy. Soldiers could march quickly, messages could travel fast, and trade flowed more freely than ever before. Rome became not just a city, but the beating heart of a growing confederation. But challenges remained. The fierce Samnite tribes of central Italy waged long and bitter wars against Rome. The Samnite Wars tested Roman endurance for decades. Time and again, Rome suffered setbacks, but always it recovered, stronger than before. By the early 3rd century BCE, Rome had subdued nearly all of Italy. Yet even then, new storms gathered. In the south lay the wealthy Greek colonies, cities rich with culture and trade. When conflict arose, the Greeks called for aid from a powerful foreign king, Pyrrhus of Epirus. With his elephants and seasoned troops, Pyrrhus defeated the Romans in costly battles. Yet each victory drained him, leading to the phrase, a Pyrrhic victory. A win so costly is nearly a defeat. Eventually, Pyrrhus withdrew, leaving Rome triumphant. By 265 BCE, Rome stood as the master of Italy. Its soldiers were hardened, its alliances strong, and its ambitions rising. The Republic had forged itself in fire, but far greater challenges awaited. Across the sea lay a rival equal in power and wealth, Carthage. With Italy under Roman control, the Republic's gaze turned to the wider Mediterranean. Across the sea stood Carthage, a wealthy maritime power founded by Phoenician traders. Carthage ruled the waves, its fleets dominating trade routes from North Africa to Spain and Sicily. And it was Sicily, a fertile island between Italy and Africa, that became the spark of conflict. In 264 BCE, a dispute over a Sicilian city drew both Rome and Carthage into war. What began as a small quarrel soon became a struggle for supremacy. Rome, powerful on land but inexperienced at sea, faced Carthage's mighty navy. To meet this challenge, the Romans did something extraordinary. They built a fleet from scratch. But Rome was not content with ships alone. To turn naval battles into something more familiar, like fighting on land, they invented the corvus, a boarding bridge with a spike that could hook onto enemy decks. Once attached, Roman soldiers would storm across, turning sea battles into infantry fights. The war raged for over 20 years. It was brutal, costly, and uncertain. At times, Rome lost fleets to storms and saw thousands of men perish in the waves. Yet Rome's persistence never wavered. Slowly, painfully, victory came. By 241 BCE, Carthage was forced to surrender, ceding Sicily to Rome, the Republic's first province beyond Italy. This triumph marked the beginning of Rome as a Mediterranean power. But peace was only temporary. The rivalry with Carthage was not extinguished. It was only waiting for a more dangerous chapter, one led by a general whose name would forever echo through history. Hannibal. The First Punic War had humbled Carthage, but not broken it. In the years that followed, Carthage rebuilt its strength in Spain, forging new armies and gathering wealth under the command of one family, the Barcas. From that family rose a man whose name would terrify Rome, Hannibal. From childhood, Hannibal was taught to hate Rome. Legend says his father made him swear an oath never to be a friend of the Republic. When he became commander in Spain, Hannibal acted swiftly, besieging the city of Saguntum, a Roman ally. Rome protested, but Hannibal ignored them. War was declared in 218 BCE, and so began the Second Punic War, one of the most famous struggles in history. Instead of sailing to Italy, Hannibal chose a daring route. He led his army, tens of thousands of men, cavalry, and even war elephants, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and over the icy Alps. The journey was brutal, costing many lives, but when Hannibal emerged into Italy, Rome was unprepared. For years, Hannibal crushed Roman legions in battle. At the Trebia River, he outmaneuvered them. At Lake Trasimene, he ambushed them in a fog, slaughtering thousands. And then came Cannae in 216 BCE, his greatest triumph. There, Hannibal encircled an army twice his size, destroying nearly all of it. It was one of the worst defeats in Rome's history, and fear swept across Italy. Yet Rome did not surrender. The Senate refused peace. Instead, they adopted a strategy of patience, avoiding open battle and slowly cutting off Hannibal's supplies. The Roman general Fabius earned the name the Delayer, keeping Rome alive through caution rather than glory. Hannibal fought on in Italy for more than a decade, undefeated in battle, but unable to break Rome's resilience. Meanwhile, Roman armies carried the fight into Spain and eventually to North Africa. There, under the command of a new leader, Scipio Africanus. Rome would challenge Carthage directly, forcing Hannibal to return home. The stage was set for a final, decisive clash. By 202 BCE, the tide of war had shifted. Hannibal, once master of Italy, was recalled to defend his homeland. Across the plains of North Africa, two of history's greatest generals prepared to meet: Hannibal of Carthage and Scipio Africanus of Rome. The Battle of Zama was unlike Hannibal's earlier victories. His army, though experienced, was weakened by years of war. Scipio, young but brilliant, had studied Hannibal's tactics and was ready with answers. Hannibal unleashed his war elephants first, hoping to scatter the Roman lines. But Scipio had prepared. His soldiers opened channels in their ranks, guiding the elephants harmlessly through before striking them down. Then came the clash of infantry. Hannibal's veterans pushed hard, but Scipio's legions held firm. At the decisive moment, Roman cavalry, commanded by Massinissa, a Numidian ally, struck from the rear. Surrounded, the Carthaginian army collapsed. Hannibal, the terror of Rome, was finally defeated. The war ended with harsh terms. Carthage lost its fleet, its overseas territories, and its ability to wage war without Rome's permission. Though the city survived, it was broken, while Rome emerged as the unchallenged power of the Western Mediterranean. For the Romans, the victory was not just military, it was destiny fulfilled. They had faced their greatest enemy and endured. Yet the spirit of conquest, once ignited, could not be contained. Rome would not stop at Italy or Sicily or Spain. Its ambitions now stretched across seas and continents. But even as Rome grew stronger abroad, tensions brewed at home. Wealth from conquest poured into the Republic, but so did inequality. The next chapters of Roman history would not be written by foreign generals, but by Rome's own citizens, struggling over land, power, and the future of the Republic itself. After the defeat of Carthage, Rome's ambitions expanded further east. The legions marched into Greece, Asia Minor, and beyond, toppling the mighty successors of Alexander the Great. Victories over Macedonia and the Seleucid Empire brought not only new lands but immense treasure. Rome was no longer just a city or a republic of farmers. It was becoming a Mediterranean empire. But with great wealth came great problems. The old Roman virtues, discipline, simplicity, equality among citizens, were slowly eroded. Conquered lands were divided, and the wealthy elite seized vast estates, called latifundia, worked by slaves brought in from abroad. Ordinary Roman farmers, once the backbone of the legions, struggled to survive. Many were forced off their land, crowding into the city of Rome, poor and restless. At the same time, political corruption spread. Senators grew rich from war and bribes, while the voice of the common people weakened. The Republic's carefully balanced system strained under the weight of greed and ambition. Amid this unrest rose two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They sought to restore justice by giving land back to the poor and strengthening the rights of ordinary citizens. But their reforms met fierce resistance from the Senate. Tiberius was killed in a riot, and years later, Gaius met the same fate. Their deaths marked a turning point. The Republic had shown that it would spill the blood of its own to protect the privileges of the powerful. The struggle between rich and poor, Senate and people, would not fade. Instead, it would grow more violent, setting the stage for decades of upheaval. For now, though Rome's armies continued to march, its territories expanding. But the unity that once defined the Republic was breaking apart. The true enemies of Rome were no longer abroad. They were within the Republic strained under inequality and unrest. New leaders rose, men whose power came not from tradition, but from their armies. Among the first was Gaius Marius, a skilled general from humble origins. Marius transformed Rome's military. No longer would only landowning citizens serve in the legions. Now the poor could enlist, earning pay, loot, and the hope of land after service. This reform made the army stronger, but it also tied soldiers' loyalty not to the Republic, but to their general. A dangerous shift had begun. Marius proved his worth by defeating Rome's enemies abroad, including the fierce Germanic tribes threatening Italy. He became a hero to the people, elected consul an unprecedented 7 times. Yet his dominance bred rivals. One such rival was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, another ambitious commander. During a war against the kingdom of Mithridates in the east, conflict erupted between Marius and Sulla.